Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about core wounds. I am ready to go deep this month and look at what is really at the root of all of our behaviors, beliefs, and responses. I believe that right now, self-awareness is so imperative, and understanding why we do what we do is going to lead us into a deeper freedom and invite us to come back home to our truest selves. So this month, we're going to be exploring the role our core wounds play in our life and how we can begin to heal them. So what do you say? Let's hop into it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
It's Mary, and I am so excited for another fabulous episode today around core wounds. We are finalizing our month's topic today. We've had a couple great episodes. The first was identifying your core wounds, and we really got into the basics, the foundation of this whole term called core wounds, what they are, how to identify them, what the 6 common core wounds are. And I really invited you to start thinking about what yours might be. So go back and listen to that initial episode. And then last week, my assistant Liz and I got into a fabulous, candid conversation, as always, about core wounds. And then this week, I have brought on a special guest expert, Jake Kauffman. He is somebody that I have met, probably about a year ago. And we have connected with different people in our circles. And because we're both coaches, we speak the same language. And I'm excited to have him on the show today because he really loves getting into the subconscious mind and talking about things like the root of the issue, core wounds. And Jake is a high performance coach and business mentor with a mission for coaches, for entrepreneurs, for executives. And Jake was a former healthcare sales executive, but knew that he had a deeper calling to really support coaches, entrepreneurs, and influencers in their own personal transformation, so that they could essentially really grow their business and increase their ability to create breakthroughs themselves. And since 2018, Jake has coached hundreds of the top online coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs to overcome their subconscious self-sabotage while supporting them in growing their own business revenue. He has this just a brilliant ability to go internal and then really have that translate into their external lives. And he is also an author and a speaker. He just came out with his first book called Love Me. That came out last fall, and it talks about his own story of abuse growing up and how he overcame the pain and ultimately unlocked his own potential to serve and support others in their own personal development and transformation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Jake. Hey, everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because as you just heard, I have got Jake Kauffman on the show today. Hey, Jake, how you doing?
Mary, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Man, I'm doing really well. It's been a ride, and I'm so glad to have you on the show to talk about core wounds because this feels like something for me that no matter what topic I cover on the podcast, inevitably it shows up in my life and I have to address it. And so I'm like, oh, great. We're doing core wounds. And I always think like I've done my work around this. Sure. We get to have a little, whatever you like, put the lid on it and we're done. Mm-hmm. And inevitably here we are. And it's like, all right, let's take a look at the core wound as we're going through it in real time. And I love that because it just, for me, creates like richer conversations. And one of the things that I love about you is just your vulnerability, your transparency, and how you come across not only to your audience, but with your clients. Like it's so evident that like you do your own work while you were helping others really achieve the best version of themselves. And for people who don't know you, and this is their first time kind of getting to know you, will you take us on a little like Jake history and share kind of like how you got to be where you are now? Because I know, like, by knowing a little bit of your story, you as a successful entrepreneur helping other coaches become successful, like that has not always been your story. So how did it get started, and then bring us up to speed to today?
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. By the way, I'm super excited to talk about this because this is really what I'm passionate about the most is supporting people in this way, because I realize that, and you kind of alluded to this without actually touching on it, which is that the journey is never over.
Yeah.
Right? We're constantly evolving as humans, but it's worth pointing out that we're either always progressing or we're regressing. There really is no in between. As often as we might like to think there is, and the fact that we can be stuck, it's really just an illusion. And so this is one of the biggest things that I find myself supporting my clients around, is this illusion, this notion that we can be at any point in time or in any given moment stuck, when really there is no such thing. We're either progressing towards our goals or we're regressing away from them. As far as my own story, my own personal story, I was born and raised in a small town in Michigan, went to school in Minnesota, and eventually found myself in the healthcare technology space. Meanwhile, I became extremely passionate about the world of personal development and this idea of becoming the best version of myself. And that, like I alluded to earlier, that journey is never over. It's kind of like our physical fitness, right? What happens if you stop exercising a muscle? It atrophies and it starts to lose its strength. And so I fell in love with the idea of exercising my mind-body connection, my mental, my spiritual, my emotional state in a way that opened up the doors of success for me, right? Because they say that emotional intelligence is by far and away the biggest indicator or predicator to success. And so innately, I fell in love with the idea of continually and persistently investing in that area of my life to live up to my potential, really. And I'm actually a firm believer that that's not possible. I do believe that God's gift to us in this lifetime is more potential than we'll ever be able to live up to, and that our gift to God and to the world is to use as much time as possible and as much of our resources as possible trying to live up to that potential. And eventually I left the healthcare technology space and went into private coaching. And now I have, a thriving business where I support online coaches and consultants in growing and scaling their business. And I also have private corporate executive clients that I serve on the side as well to supplement my business. And I absolutely love what I do, because I believe that becoming a powerful coach or becoming a powerful leader requires being powerfully coached or powerfully led. And so the people who have the biggest influence, have the biggest impact, need the most powerful support. And so for me, like you alluded to, I find it absolutely necessary for me to do the work that I'm inviting my clients into, that if I'm going to be coaching it, I need to be creating it. And all of this was crystallized in my mind, going back to my early childhood, where I felt alone and wanted nothing more than to support other people through and with their wounding that ultimately prevented them from feeling capable of accomplishing their vision or having a major impact.
Wow. I think that there's so many things I want to touch on with that. And the thing that stands out to me the most is that moment of going back to childhood and knowing that experience, that wound of feeling alone. I know for me, it was this feeling of like, it turned into a fear of abandonment. And for me, I see this flesh out in two different ways. One is you take that core wound, like I am alone. And we talked about this on the first episode of all those kinds of thoughts that run through our mind as children based on events that happen to us. Like I'm unworthy, I'm not deserving, I'm alone, something is wrong with me, you know, that kind of idea that we're fatally flawed.
Sure.
And it gets fleshed out either kind of like backwards, where like if I'm alone, then we start living out of that place of loneliness, kind of like the self-fulfilling prophecy. And we don't connect, we don't create community, we isolate. Or like for you, that was an amazing motivating factor to connect with other people and to really take that and like use it for good. And I'm curious what your process was like personally to get to that place where you were able to identify that like that was the thing that you started out with, that was the wound that you started out with. Like, was that an aha moment for you? Was that something that you kind of found over time as a theme? Like, how did you get to the nail of the head of I am not alone, that was for you, your core wound?
It's a great question. And to be a little bit more specific and to clarify, my core wound was actually that I don't belong here.
Wow.
And which by virtue would leave me alone, of course.
Yeah.
So how I came to that point was by asking myself a question that I am often asking my clients, which is, what do your results say that you believe about yourself? Because your results will always paint a perfect picture in terms of how you feel about yourself. And you kind of alluded to this when you said that oftentimes our egoic nature is to overcompensate.
Yeah.
Because it can go one of two ways, right? You can have the person that overcompensates and that invests so much in their external experience or their image as an egoic response to their insecurities, cover up those insecurities. Or, you can have the experience of, someone that is in deep, deep scarcity, whether that's relationally, financially, physically speaking. And all of this serves to basically serve as confirmation bias to the original wound, right? So it's this cycle that we find ourselves living in oftentimes. And this is what I really support entrepreneurs and coaches with is deconstructing these egoic faculties that we use to protect ourselves against experiencing that pain again.
Yes.
But, go ahead.
No, go.
So for me, it was really analyzing all areas of my life, going back to, like we said, my early childhood, because historically speaking, they say about 70% of our cognitive development happens between the ages of 2 and 7. Yeah. And this is really where our identity and our personality is in many ways more or less cemented. But our personality isn't who we actually are. Our personality is the masks that we wear to achieve and experience love and acceptance from other people.
Yeah. I think that concept alone is so mind-blowing. Like, I remember hearing that, and since doing work with like Dr. Joe, and he always talks about how your personality equals your personal reality.
Yep.
And vice versa. Like, your personal reality ends up equating to your personality, and that it's just this construct that we fabricated, putting on the masks in order to avoid pain. And I think what's so tricky is you look around the world and you see people, at least social media, and you see all these people that are successful, especially if you're in the space of creating your own business, if you're an entrepreneur, if there's any part of you that is achievement oriented. My boyfriend Bentley loves watching like sports documentaries. And so we're constantly watching like whatever the Michael Jordan one was. We're always like watching these things. I'm learning to love them. Okay. It's not like my go-to, but I find the psychology fascinating because you see these people that are so insanely like number one, obsessed with
Sure.
their craft, but very, very successful. And so I'm always thinking, okay, what's the mental state that created their success? Because you just think like oftentimes some people are just born with this, that they have this innate skill. But oftentimes I'm like, no, this is, if you really get down to it, this is a beautifully constructed way of being to avoid pain.
Sure.
And as you get down to the stories of some of these athletes or successful people, you realize that oftentimes the success is just a byproduct of trying to earn love and to be more acceptable, to be more loving, even though we would praise that in our society as like, yay, like you're successful, like way to go. But do you find that in your clients that people's drive for success can be like emanating from a core wound? All right, real quick, I had to share the exciting news that you can now text with me. And yes, it is really me. There's no team, there's no automation. Like I am actually on my phone texting you. And I love this because if you're like me, you're sick of all of the drama and the negativity on social media, or maybe your inbox is completely overwhelmed with emails and you don't even get to read my emails. Well, now we can chat over text. And what I love about this is that I'll be sending you little love notes and reminders to bring in some more ease and gentleness and light and grace and love into your life through weekly affirmations and encouragement. So what do you say? You want to be text friends? Let's do it. Here is my number, y'all. Grab a pen, or of course you can go to maryhyatt.com/text. But here's the number. It's 615-930-3522 and say hi. Let's connect. All right. Now back to this week's episode.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. It is, I would go so far as to say that it is the norm. It is by far the rule and not the exception, because emotional intelligence and the world of personal development is still very new.
Yeah.
It is still very much in its infancy stages, at least when you think about it from the perspective of the sheer number of people who fully commit themselves to it. Because what I've found is that a lot of people have committed to it at a certain point in time in their life. So it becomes this life event, right? As if it's a concert that we go to and we have this wonderful experience that we take away lessons from. You know, you talked about Joe Dispenza, right? Yeah. There is this massive misconception that you can go to a conference or invest in a workshop or read a book, and that will be the thing that crystallizes the change or the transformation, when really it's everything that you do after that, right? The day-to-day decisions that you make, these micro commitments, these micro habits that stack up day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, that end up becoming a part of your character. And character is very different from personality. Character literally means set in stone. And it's the reflection of who you be and how you show up in this world and how you relate to yourself, other people, and the world. That gets you all of the results that you experience.
Gosh, it's really beautiful to think about that. Like, that distinction between character and personality. I think we're so attached to our personality. You know, we talk about Enneagram a lot on the podcast. We talk about Myers-Briggs. We talk about all the different ways of kind of understanding yourself, archetypes, astrology, everything. And we can get so caught up. And I love the word you used at the very beginning of this, the illusion, right? Like the illusion of who we are versus the essence, the innate character of who we are, and that is not based on having to be pleasing to anyone else. Like, it's not ego motivated. I mean, if you think about character, there's nothing really sexy about character. It's like it is created out of that continual showing up when it's hard, like when there's no immediate payoff, doing the challenging things. I think about like with meditation and just creating that consistent practice. It's not typically in the meditation that you experience this like euphoria, right? It's like
100%.
doing that day in and day out that helps you get through the hardest things in life. And that is that character building type of thing. Like, can I show up when I can't see the immediate result from it? And I think that there's something that though is really like, I just get a sense of like safety and security from that because it's not fleeting. It's not trying to earn that acceptance, earn that love. It's like, we're just doing this because it's the right thing to do. You know, that it is instilling inside of ourselves something that's like good and holy and true. Oh my gosh. So as you've been doing this work of like sort of peeling back the layers for your clients who are obviously everybody wants success. Like that's a no-brainer, right? Like nobody's saying, how can I make less money? So in that like idea of moving into a place of wanting just, I don't know, like more fulfillment, but also more success. I mean, at least what I find with my clients is that going back to that idea of that deep scarcity, that there are so many stories below the surface that are controlling. It's like most people have done a lot of trainings. They're certified. They have all the credentials, you know, or at least they know, you know, where to go and get them. And so to me, it's never an issue of education. It's never an issue of knowledge. It is the subconscious mind. So I would love for you, because I know that's like you eat, sleep, and breathe this and teach this. So will you talk a little bit about like that link of those beliefs and how that affects success or lack thereof?
Yeah, I love that we're moving into this because yes, that is 100%. I eat, sleep, and breathe this. And it's the majority of what I support my clients with because it's how we achieve rapid transformation. Most coaches or consultants, they coach people at the conscious level. Right. As opposed to the subconscious level. And why I want to make that distinction is because our conscious mind only controls about 5 to 10% of our behavior. Whereas our subconscious mind controls about 90 to 95% of our behavior. So you can create a mindset shift or a perspective shift within someone at the conscious level, and it's still not stick in terms of changing their behavior long term.
Right.
Which is why oftentimes people will experience a significant shift within the container that they're investing in, whether it's a workshop or a seminar or a coaching relationship like we talked about. But once outside of that container, they often regress.
Totally.
And it becomes, like we talked about, it becomes this life event rather than a lifestyle because they're not continuing to work that muscle of that is self-mastery, right? Because mastery takes time, like you alluded to. It takes years. I know for myself, I've been meditating consistently every morning for 4 years. And right, the significant transformation didn't happen 3 months in or 6 months in or even a year in. It happened years in, when all of a sudden there was this massive reorientation within me, especially as it relates to my nervous system responses to stress, anxiety, and fear. So when it comes to our subconscious beliefs, it's very important to understand that what we say we want, because like you said, everybody wants success. Nobody's out there asking themselves, how can I make less money? Or how can I be less successful than I am in this moment? Nobody's asking themselves that. However, people's actions say that all the time.
Yes.
We know this as self-sabotage. So it's important to understand that what you say you want is driven by your conscious mind, but what you do is driven by your subconscious mind, which is why people say people are rarely ever what they say, but always what they do. And so when I first start working with my clients, I never concern myself with asking them, at least initially, what is it that you really want? I start to deconstruct their beliefs about what they say they want. because all you need to do is look at people's results and it will tell you everything you need to know about what they believe, what they think, which of course just determines your attitude, your energy, and your decisions and your actions.
Yeah.
And so when we start to essentially deconstruct their beliefs, because our beliefs are stored in our subconscious, that's when we can create beliefs that are congruent with what it is they actually want to create, right? Because what we're talking about is really a lack of congruence, a lack of alignment, if you will, between people's subconscious beliefs and their conscious desires. And as long as there's a lack of congruence or a lack of alignment, it's going to be like sticking a round peg in a square hole.
Yeah.
And so until we work to create that congruence, that alignment, it's going to be massively, massively difficult. And egoically, the person will end up sabotaging whatever it is that you're working with them to create on the external level for the sake of serving as confirmation bias to their egoic structure to avoid pain.
Yes.
And preserve their current identity. So, this is part of the process that I walk my clients through when we first start working together to achieve that rapid transformation, so that all of the strategy that we give them on the back end, whether I'm working with a coach or an executive, it really doesn't matter. All of that can stick, right? Because what's the point of changing your life if long-term it doesn't stick?
Right. Jake, it's like we could just stop right here and be like, okay, that was just like the best mic drop moment ever. I'm like, yes. I want to make this like so practical because I know what you're talking about as a fellow coach. I'm like, preach, brother, preach. And at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, for people that are listening and they're going, okay, like I get this, like as a concept, and what does that actually look like? Like today I had a client and we were peeling back the layers of, she wanted to implement a new strategy in her business. And it was part of our homework for her to implement this. And it didn't happen. Right. So it was like, there was avoidance, there was resistance, there was that kind of self-sabotage moment. And so it was like, all right, this is not, and I think this is always the case. It's never about what you think it's about.
Of course.
And so I'm like, we got to dig, like what's showing up here, what's going on here. And it part of what the homework was to show up and be seen in a new way on social media. And so oftentimes people have a lot of fear around showing up and being seen. And as we pulled back the layers to figure out, okay, where's the real root of this? Like what is at play here? Because the drama around it isn't equal to like what the task was. And so as we peeled back, I realized that her relationship with her mother always tried to instill her own insecurity that she had for herself onto her daughters. And so she would say things like, well, I'm not very pretty or I'm not very smart. And you feel that way too, right? That kind of thing. And so there was a recipe for love that got drilled in really early on, which was, if I'm insecure, I'll be loved, which sounds crazy. But in reality, like we all have those warped messages we get as children that with our conscious mind, it's like, who would ever say that? Like, but we're as little kids, age 0 to 7, we don't have the mental capacity to filter out and say, that's mom stuff, not my stuff, but it's like, we take that on. So all of a sudden we realize, fast forward, that the reason she's self-sabotaging and not doing those things is because it risks her ability in her little girl brain to be loved. Because if she's confident, if she shows up to be seen, if she gets out in front of the world, all of a sudden she risks losing the love of her mother that needs her to be insecure in order to get that love. So I think that this is what's so powerful. I just wanted to illustrate kind of an example of how this can flesh itself out in our own lives. And I would love for you, if you can think of any like relevant stories to share, because I think this is where we can really start connecting the dots of like, what have you seen in some of your clients where it's like, it wasn't about what it was about. And when you peeled back the layers, it was like, ooh, boom, like that's the real issue that's unconsciously hijacking the whole thing.
Totally. Well, for context purposes, and I love that you had this experience with your client, because that new level of awareness has the potential, when coupled with applied committed action, can absolutely change her entire life.
Totally.
And the lives of the people that she's connected with and in relationship to.
Yeah.
Because she's going to innately give other people permission to step up and own their power and shine in a way that's uncomfortable, because that's what it's doing. So I love that example. I think it's important that we talk about the 3 lies that we egoically are constantly telling ourselves.
Yeah.
And I especially find this to be prevalent in the world of entrepreneurship, because like you mentioned, so oftentimes the success of entrepreneurs or independent business owners is intricately tied to their attempt to achieve, receive, or not lose out on, not miss out on love or acceptance.
Yes.
And so these 3 lies are: I am what I do, I am what I have, and I am what other people say or think about me.
Mm.
And when I start working with someone, it's very, very easy, based on just a few conversations with them, about what lie they're playing out in their business.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, this is happening subconsciously.
Right.
In the same way that our bodies are a reflection of our subconscious mind, so is our business.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the strategies that people adopt and embrace in their business, you can tell very quickly what lie they're living in, and what wounding they're continuing to live out in relationship to themselves, in relationship to their primary caregiver, like you alluded to with your client and her mother, or in romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the best examples that I have is, I recently started working with an e-commerce professional, and who was very successful. She was, making $50,000 to $60,000 a month when we first started working together. But she was working herself into a bed.
Yeah.
She was wearing herself thin, overworked, overwhelmed. And we started to really unpack, the egoic response that was so prevalent for her, only to find out that, similar to your client, we found out that there was this deeply seated, deeply held story going back to, her early childhood, that she's alone and that she can't she can't count on the support from other people, or that she can't trust the support of others. And so how did that show up in her business? She needed to do everything herself.
Yeah. Like overly self-reliant.
100%. And so, of course, the people that she hired, the contractors that she hired, the agency that she hired, all served as confirmation bias to reinforce this story, this core wound.
Yeah.
And so once we dug to the root of that, and we were able to heal that wound and the experiences that manifested it and reinforced it, then we were able to go about making changes in her business that she felt safe to make. Because with your client, she's actually doing exactly what her nervous system is designed to do.
100%.
In avoiding going live on social media or being seen on social media in a really powerful, vulnerable way. She's doing exactly what her nervous system is wired to do.
Yeah.
And so with my client, once we were able to create that awareness, we were able to actually and the acceptance, we were actually able to step into action, and we completely restructured her business. We made new hires, made new strategic hires. We hired a different agency, one that was actually capable of, handling the volume that she was capable of, that her business was capable of at scale. And within 3 months, she had a $1.1 million month. So literally going from about $50,000 to $60,000 a month in our first month working together, to 3 months later, she had $1 million month.
Wow.
And, now all of a sudden, we have new problems, right? Because we have to hire, and great problems, of course, but problems nonetheless. And so, and of course, not only did it show up in her business, Mary, it also showed up in her relationships. And ironically enough, one of the ways in which that was reinforced was that she was consistently attracting and in relationship with addicts.
Yep.
And
I see this all the time.
yep. And so, of course, what did that serve to reinforce? Well, this idea, this notion that I can't count on the support of other people. I can't trust the support of other people. So, of course, she would attract addicts because addicts can't even support themselves.
Right.
And so, how are they possibly going to support her? And so, like I mentioned before, it just served as confirmation bias to this original wound that kept her from truly being successful in the way that she was capable of.
Wow. So this is where I feel like, and I'm just going to pause because I think this is so huge to understand that so often when we find ourselves looking externally, and we'll, like in that situation with your client, it would be very easy for her to look at, well, it's this contractor's fault. It's this agency's fault. It's this addict that I'm dating. It's his fault. It's, and you look at everything that these people are doing against you. Like it's, that is the problem, not you. And if you go back to kind of the fundamental belief of we are a mirror, everything in our life is that mirror to what is our subconscious programming, that story, it shows up. And I think that's really important. Like you've said this several times, and this is something that, I feel like I first maybe learned through Brooke Castillo and all the work that she does around coaching, but that idea of everything in your life, the car you drive, the clothes you wear, the state of your body, the money in your bank account, the status of your relationship, the quality of your relationship is all a reflection. All of those results externally are a reflection of what's going on inside of yourself. And I love that you keep bringing that up because I think that what's hopeful about that, at least to me, is it's like, okay, if I've created this based out of the thoughts that I've been thinking that are mostly subconscious, reaction to that core wound, avoiding pain, earning love, then you change that operating system, you change those fundamental core beliefs, all of a sudden the cascading effect, everything else becomes a mirror for those new beliefs, for those new thoughts. And that's where you see, like, when you see people go through massive transformation and change, you go, oh my God, like they lost all this weight and, their business skyrocketed and they're finally in a healthy, like fulfilling relationship. To me, that's always the byproduct of what has been going on internally and those fundamental, like core belief shifts that have taken place. And I'm so glad that you kept reiterating the idea of like, this is just a mirror, that confirmation bias. Like, so I think the invitation, at least for me, doing this work continually is always looking at, okay, what does my external reality say about what's happening internally?
Of course.
And that's a powerful question to keep asking.
It's incredibly powerful. And, I know you talked about wanting to make this extremely practical for people.
Yeah.
And for anybody listening, if you want to experience a significant up level in your life or in your business, one of the best ways to do it is to write down your beliefs as it relates to everything in your life. Your finances, your relationships, your perception of women, men, your parents, you name it.
Yeah.
And determine which beliefs are yours. Because in all likelihood, not all of them are yours. They've been simply passed down to you and then reinforced over time, whether it be through conditioning, whether it be through environment, or whether it be through the results that you create yourself. And determine what beliefs need to be in place for you to actually create your desired outcome. Because as long as there's a belief that's incongruent with your desired external outcome, it's never going to happen. And if it does happen, it likely will not be consistent long term.
Yes. Yep. Gosh, so true. Like I see people so often, like they'll hit a mark in their business and then it goes way back. And it's, as you peel it back, there's this usually some layer around them believing they don't deserve that level of success and all the beliefs around what success is or what it takes to continue to be successful. And to me, that exercise, the one you just expressed and explained, is one of the most powerful things that you can do that literally will be one of those exercises you like keep coming back to over and over again, because it's always, to me at least, it's always up leveling and finding the sneaky ways that those wounds get triggered and come back up, and all, we're constantly having to navigate that. But I know sometimes for me, I'll just ask myself, like, why am I driving this car?
Great
Like
question.
just something like simple. Like, it's not just because I drive a Subaru Outback, by the way. And
Very practical. Love it.
very practical, but it says so much, like, about my internal state of beliefs. And sometimes I'm like, okay, is it because I just love a Subaru? I mean, granted,
Sure.
they're great. They're, you go through all the reasons why that's a great car to have, but as opposed to like driving a BMW, like, what's the difference there? And that's just kind of like a simple, easy thing you can pick out, or like, why am I wearing these clothes today? Or why am I living in the house that I'm living in? All of those really tell you so much about what you believe about people, about the world, about God, about yourself. And that, to me, is why I love talking about core wounds, because once you can get to the center of the onion, it opens up everything. And then you actually get to live from a place of conscious intention rather than by default. And that, to me, is like the whole point of all of it. I know that, like, anybody listening, I'm sure, has already fallen deeply in love with you and the work that you do. And I would love for you to just share where people can find you, how they can work with you. Like, where do they go to get more of Jake?
So I predominantly use Instagram, or Clubhouse. I have fallen in love with Clubhouse and the accessibility that it provides to teaching and learning and influencers who are having a massive impact in the world. You can find me on Instagram, Jacob Kauffman. You can also go to my website, jacobkauffman.com. Otherwise, on Clubhouse, my handle is I am Jake Kauffman. Would love to connect with people. I would love to serve you in any way I possibly can.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to link to all of that in the show notes, so you can literally just scroll up, scroll down, and you'll see all of that. And make sure to go follow Jake, give him a like, connect with him. And one of the things I love about you is you are so, like, responsive and approachable. And is there anything that you'd like to share as we sign off? Anything that, last words of wisdom that we didn't get to, or does this feel good and complete?
No, absolutely. I would love to leave the audience with this, because so much of what we talked about today, when you really dig beneath the surface, is people's relationship with fear.
Yeah.
I think fear is an incredibly, incredibly useful tool, because fear tells you what isn't real. And the reason I say that is because nobody's actually afraid of what they think they're afraid of.
Yeah.
They're afraid of choosing into it. Because in that moment, two things need to happen. One, they have to let go of the stories that they used to give love to that kept them trapped in limitation. And two, they have to embrace the potential emotions that come with stepping into that fear.
Yeah.
And that's what people ultimately want to avoid, are the emotions that come from the experience that they think they're going to have if they take this certain type of action. And so if you're listening, this is, I'm glad that we touched on meditation, because this is where the power of meditation really comes into play, because you can actually take yourself there. You can actually, in your mind, through the use of deep meditation, play out the scenario that you're afraid of, or the scenario that you're trying to avoid. And you can actually confront the emotions that you're trying to avoid. And the minute you confront those emotions, there's a reorientation that happens in your nervous system. You mentioned that one of the reasons that people they only ever achieve a certain level of success is because on some level they feel unworthy of it. I personally don't actually believe that. I think it's because they don't feel safe to experience it.
Yeah.
On a very somatic level, they do not feel safe to experience that level of success because of what might happen if they do.
Totally. Yes. Yep.
And so when you enable yourself to experience those emotions, your nervous system adjusts to that experience in a way that creates familiarity and creates safety. Think about what happens on the other side of a very vulnerable, difficult, confronting conversation with your ex or with your significant other, whoever it may be. It doesn't matter. It could be your boss, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling. There's this massive relief that we often experience, especially on the other side of, say a cry, a really good cry, like an ugly cry. And there's this, because we're releasing the emotion that we were initially so afraid of stepping into.
Yeah.
And so we find this to be true when it comes to the things that we're avoiding. And so, if you're listening to this, the breakthrough that you're looking for, the growth that you're looking for, it's really on the other side of the things that you're avoiding.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes, like in my experience, like once you go through it, you're like, okay, like it instills confidence. You got through something challenging, something hard, and doesn't swallow you up. Like, you might be afraid that it will. And always, in my experience, creates freedom and liberation. And oh gosh, I'm so grateful for your wisdom, from your just sharing your experience of all of your own learnings. And I know that you do your own work, not only just in helping others, but your own personal work. It's so evident and just so powerful to witness in you. And I appreciate just all that you have shared so deeply, and just that invitation to lean in all of this, and that there really is such a gift when you can go to the root. Like it will free you up to create a life that is what you actually really desire and what you want. So thank you, friend. Thank you. Y'all, go follow Jake. Make sure to tag him, tag me, as you get all of these takeaways, nuggets from today's episode. And y'all just know that we have a fabulous month ahead next month. But until next week, remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. We'll see you next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.